The stars bent under the weight of her presence, or so the legends claimed. And now, those same stars framed her warship outside Thomas Vance's viewport, its silhouette blotting out constellations, like a living wound in the void. The ship wasn't just massive, it was a cathedral of terror. Spires of black alloy jutted from its hull like the bones of a slain god, and beneath them glowed the shimmering violet pulse of reactor veins that powered weapons capable of reducing cities to ash. Thomas had seen images of Mexian warships before, flickering on news feeds, distant, unreal. Seeing one in person was like staring into the maw of an abyss that hungered for entire worlds. Beside him, Emily pressed her small hand against the glass. She was 6 years old, with sandy hair tied in a crooked braid and a stuffed rabbit clutched in her arm like a lifeline. "Tommy," she whispered, her breath fogging the viewport. "Is that a Star Eater?" Thomas swallowed hard, forcing calm into his voice. "No, Em, just a big ship." His throat felt dry as sand. "Nothing to worry about." But there was everything to worry about. Queen Zariel. The name itself was enough to still 1,000 voices. She was the Mexian sovereign, ruler of the dominion that stretched across more than a third of the spiral arm. They said she took power in blood and fire, that her enemies were erased so completely, even their histories burned with them. Planets that defied her rule were shattered, their survivors scattered among the stars as slaves. Some said she hadn't spoken to another living being as an equal in 6 cycles, that she didn't need to. Fear was her language, and the galaxy understood it well. Thomas felt his ship shudder as a voice rolled through the cum system like a growl from the throat of the void. "Human vessel, you have trespassed into restricted space. Power down all systems. Prepare for boarding." His stomach nodded. Running was pointless. The Nomad wasn't built for speed or combat. A retrofitted cargo hauler could barely outrun a customs frigate, let alone a Mexian dreadnought. Emily tugged on his sleeve, her green eyes wide. "Are they mad at us?" He forced a smile. "Just some people who want to check our ship. We'll be fine." His hands moved automatically over the console, initiating docking protocols even as his pulse thundered in his ears. He could hear the docking clamps locking onto the hull with mechanical finality. The airlock cycled with a hiss. 4 Mexian guards stepped through, towering figures encased in iridescent armor that shimmered with hues of deep ocean and stormlit skies. Each had 4 arms ending in bladed digits, and their eyes forward to a face gleamed like fractured jewels. Emily whimpered softly. Thomas crouched to her level and squeezed her shoulder. "Stay behind me, no matter what." They were marched through corridors that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins, as though the ship itself were alive and breathing. The throne room loomed ahead vast, obsidian walls inlaid with shards of crystal that caught the light like frozen lightning. At its center rose a dais of writhing metal, alive and shifting, and upon it sat Zariel. She was terrible and magnificent, a vision carved from midnight and flame. Her exoskeleton shimmered in shades of deep amethyst and black, 6 arms folded, in a pose that radiated both elegance and lethality. Her crown wasn't forged. It grew from her skull, horned spires arching like the blades of a predator. 6 eyes burned with inner fire, fixed on him as if they could strip away flesh and thought alike. Thomas felt every instinct screaming at him to kneel, to avert his gaze. No one looked into the eyes of the Queen and lived. He thought of Emily, clutching her rabbit behind him, and something inside him hardened. He lifted his chin. "If you're going to kill me," he said, his voice steady as the grave, "at least look me in the eye when you do it." The words fell into a silence, so deep he could hear the thrum of his own heart. Guards stiffened, their claws twitching in disbelief. Emily let out a tiny gasp. Zari Yell rose from her throne in a single fluid motion, descending the steps with the silent grace of a hunting cat. She stopped inches from him, her shadow falling across his face. For a moment, Thomas thought he could hear the hum of power beneath her carapace. Smell the faint ozone tang of something not meant for human senses. Then she tilted her head, 6 eyes blazing with an emotion he couldn't name. Amusement? Fury? Curiosity? Her voice, when it came, was soft and melodic, the translator struggling to capture its perfect cadence. Very well, she said. I will look. And as her gaze locked with his, Thomas understood one thing with bone-deep certainty. His life and Emily's now balanced on the edge of something far more dangerous than death. The chamber was silent, save for the low hum of alien machinery resonating through the floor. Thomas felt the weight of her gaze pressing against him like a physical force, as if those 6 burning eyes could peel back the layers of his soul. She stood so close now that the faint iridescence of her exoskeleton cast a shimmer across his face. You speak boldly, Zariel said, her voice flowing like liquid crystal through the translator embedded in her thorax. Do you understand what I am, human? Thomas kept his jaw steady, though his pulse hammered in his throat. I understand enough, he said quietly. You're the one everyone fears. Her eyes narrowed slightly. A flicker of something amusement? Contempt? Rippling across her alien features. Fear is the currency of survival, she replied, circling him with predatory grace. Every creature in this galaxy knows this truth. And yet, you look at me without trembling. Thomas almost laughed, though there was nothing humorous about the situation. You don't see my knees, he muttered. Zariel's mandibles twitched. The closest thing he'd seen to a smile. Perhaps you are clever as well as insolent. She halted behind him, and Thomas felt the cool whisper of air as one of her lower arms brushed past his shoulder, a deliberate test of his reaction. He didn't flinch. Emily, still clutching her rabbit, peered around Thomas's leg, her green eyes wide but oddly calm. She's pretty, the little girl said suddenly, her small voice cutting through the suffocating tension like a beam of starlight. Every guard in the chamber froze. The translator struggled to keep up as Zariel turned, all 6 eyes fixing on the child. For the first time, Thomas felt panic claw at him. Emily, but Zariel crouched with sinuous elegance, lowering herself until her glowing gaze was level with the child's face. The movement was so fluid, so alien, it sent a chill racing up Thomas's spine. One of Zariel's upper hands unfolded, its long, blade-like fingers curling with terrifying precision, yet they stopped inches from Emily's cheek. Pretty, Zariel repeated softly, tasting the word as if it were foreign. No one has called me that in cycles. Emily blinked, utterly unfazed. You have lots of eyes, she said, like the spark bugs on Ori Station. Thomas opened his mouth to apologize, to beg, to do anything that might keep those claws from moving closer. But Zariel laughed out. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't sharp. It was a sound like wind chimes, shivering in an unseen breeze, bright and startling, and completely out of place in that cathedral of obsidian and fire. The guards stiffened, exchanging uneasy glances. Thomas could almost feel the shock radiating from them. How many of them had ever heard their queen laugh? Zariel's mandibles curved slightly, her voice carrying a strange, melodic warmth. You are either very brave, small one, or very foolish. My name's Emily, she replied, solemnly lifting her stuffed rabbit. This is Mr. Whiskers. He's never met a queen before. Something passed over Zariel's face, then something Thomas couldn't define. Curiosity, perhaps. Maybe even wonder. She rose with slow grace, towering over them once more, but the predatory tension that had filled the chamber seemed to loosen, like a coiled beast settling back into the shadows. Take them to the azure wing, Zariel commanded suddenly, her voice a note of crystalline authority that brooked no argument. They will remain as guests. Thomas stared at her, stunned. Guests? That wasn't the word he expected. Not when death had felt like a breath away. He tightened his hold on Emily's hand as the guards moved in, their blades gleaming in. The strange prismatic light dot as they were escorted out of the throne room. Thomas dared one glance over his shoulder. Zariel still stood upon the dais, her eyes fixed on him, unblinking, unreadable, glowing like embers in a sea of night. For the first time since this began, Thomas understood something chilling and profound. He had not been spared out of mercy. He had been chosen, and that, he suspected, was far more dangerous than death. Asterisk, the walls glowed like starlight. That was Thomas's first thought when the doors sealed behind them with a hiss, cutting off the low, rhythmic thrum of the alien corridors. He'd expected a cell iron bars, cold slabs, chains. Instead, the azure wing was a suite that rivaled the finest stations he'd ever seen. The floor shimmered with a sheen like liquid glass, and curved walls glowed in hues of soft blue and silver, their surfaces etched with patterns that pulsed, faintly as if alive. A vast viewport stretched across one side, revealing a panorama of the void, where constellations burned against the black like shards of diamond. Emily let out a gasp of pure wonder. Tommy, it's like sleeping inside a star. Thomas managed a tight smile. Yeah, he said, though his thoughts were far from awe. Every elegant furnishing, every carefully placed detail, screamed of one thing: control. This wasn't a gift, it was a gilded cage. The door, sealed with a whisper. Two guards took position outside, their silhouettes visible through the translucent panel. Silent sentinels, watching, waiting. Emily ran to the viewport, her reflection floating like a ghost over the stars. Look, there's a red one. Is that a sun? Thomas swallowed the knot in his throat and crouched to her level. It's a star, Em. Just a long way from home. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek, trying to steady his voice. Stay calm. Don't let her see you break. But inside, his mind raced. Why keep them alive? Why put them here? Mercy wasn't in Zariel's nature, not if even half the stories were true. Which meant this was something else. Curiosity, leverage, or something he couldn't yet name. The door chimed. Thomas shot to his feet, shielding Emily instinctively as it slid open. And there she was, Queen. Zariel stepped through the threshold like a living shadow carved from starlight and steel. She wasn't flanked by guards this time. No honor guard. No fanfare, just her. Yet the room seemed to shrink around her presence, every line and gleam of her exoskeleton alive with quiet menace. 6 eyes burned faintly, reflections of the galaxies beyond the glass. Thomas's pulse kicked hard. Your Majesty, he began, his voice taut with the effort to sound steady. She raised a hand slender, jointed, ending in razor-sharp talons that caught the blue glow like splintered ice. Titles mean little here, she said, her tone melodic, almost soft. You may call me Zariel. He blinked. That name had been whispered across countless worlds, followed by silence and ruin. Hearing it now offered like a secret, unsettled. Him more than any threat could have. Zariel moved further into the room, her limbs flowing with an elegance that made the air seem to hum. Emily pressed closer to Thomas, but didn't hide. Her green eyes, wide and unblinking, tracked every motion with innocent fascination. The Queen's gaze followed the child. She asks many questions, Zariel murmured, as though amused. She has spoken to my attendants of gardens, of stars, of mothers. Her eyes shifted back to Thomas, their glow intensifying. Tell me, human, what is a mother? The question hit like a pulse blast. For a moment, Thomas couldn't find his voice. A mother. he said slowly, is the one who gives life, and then spends the rest of it protecting that life. Loving it, Zariel tilted her head, the motion unervingly graceful. Love, your word recurs often in your speech. Define it. Thomas hesitated. How could you distill something so vast into words that an empire built on fear could understand? It's choosing someone else's survival over your own. It's staying when you could leave. It's... He swallowed hard. It's what makes life more than just existing. A flicker passed through Zariel's eyes, a ripple of light, a tremor in the still surface of her composure. Strange, she said softly. Among my kind, attachment is weakness. To protect one above the many is treason against the whole. She turned to the viewport, her reflection fracturing against the stars. And yet, your words do not repulse me. For a long moment, the only sound was the whisper of the ship's systems, a steady thrum beneath their feet. Then Emily's small voice broke the silence. Are you lonely? Thomas's breath caught. Emily, but Zariel didn't strike. She didn't laugh. Slowly, impossibly, she turned, 6 eyes narrowing not in anger, but something far more. Dangerous. Vulnerability. I have ruled for 6 cycles, she said, her voice a low murmur, almost to herself. I ascended on the day blood washed my palace floors. Since then, no hand has touched mine. No voice has spoken without trembling. She faced Thomas fully now, until today. Her talons traced the edge of the glass, and the stars beyond seemed to flare brighter in their reflection. Fear keeps the galaxy in order, but perhaps... Her voice trailed off, the words dissolving like smoke. Thomas stared at her, unease nodding with something he couldn't name. Because in that moment, with the weight of empires between them, he realized a truth far more terrifying than death. Queen Zariel wasn't simply curious. She was changing, and whatever she became, the galaxy would never be the same. Asterisk power is a fortress, they said, and the first cracks always start within. Thomas felt those cracks long before the alarm sounded. They were whispers at first half heard, conversations that stilled when he entered the corridor, the way the guard's multifaceted eyes flicked toward him and then away too quickly. The Mexian attendants no longer met his gaze. Silence lingered like a bruise in the air, heavy and purple with intent. The palace ship was alive with tension. He saw it in the rigid posture of soldiers, in the hushed tones of advisors slithering through vaulted corridors, pulsing with bioluminescent veins. War was coming not from outside, but from within. He was in the Azure Wing when Zariel summoned him. The doors parted, and there she stood, framed by the cold glow of starlight. Her silhouette was a sculpture of living metal, lethal beauty coiled in perfect stillness. But her voice carried something Thomas had never heard before. Walk with me, she said. They moved through shadowed corridors, where crystal walls refracted light into fractured rainbows. No guards followed. That alone told him everything. This wasn't a queen's command. This was something far more dangerous. Your generals, Thomas said finally, his voice low. They don't trust you. Her mandibles flexed in what might have been amusement or warning. They have forgotten their place. She glanced at him, 6 eyes burning like molten suns. They smell change, Thomas Vance, and change terrifies. Predators. They entered the observatory dome. Stars spread across the void like frozen embers. Zariel approached the viewport, her reflection fractured in the glass. For the first time, Thomas saw weariness settle on her shoulders like invisible. Chains, the human colonies, she said softly. They gather weapons. They whisper of resistance. Thomas stiffened. Because they're desperate. You've conquered half the spiral arms, Zariel. They think annihilation is the only card they have left. Then they are fools, she sighed, voice hardening. Their strike cannot harm me. It will only bring ruin upon their worlds. Unless you give them another option. She turned, the alien planes of her face catching the cold light. Another option? Talk to them. Negotiate. The words tasted reckless, but he pushed on. You don't need more blood, Zariel. You don't need more fear. Show them something different. Something better. For a heartbeat, silence stretched taut wire strung between stars. Then, impossibly, she laughed. Not sharp, not cruel, just soft and bitter. Like glass breaking under snow. You speak as though the galaxy is clay, ready to be reshaped by gentle hands, she murmured, her talons grazing the viewport. But clay does not bleed. Clay does not betray. Her voice lowered, quiet as a blade sliding free. When I ascended, Thomas, the first lesson carved into my bones was this: mercy kills faster than war. Maybe, he said, meeting her gaze with something fiercer than fear. But so does loneliness. Her breath caught not audible, but visible in the sudden stillness of her frame. Your daughter, Zariel said at last, turning back to the stars. She asked me if I was lonely. Do you know what I told her? Thomas swallowed. No. I said nothing, she whispered. Because I did not know. Her reflection in the glass shimmered like a phantom. For a moment, he saw not a queen of fire and steel, but something raw, almost fragile, beneath the weight of her crown. And then the moment shattered. The cum crystal embedded in the wall flared crimson, the chamber filling with a jagged hum of alert tones. A voice hissed through, distorted but urgent. High Command requests immediate war council. Dravidian fleets move on the outer rim requesting authorization to strike. Zariel's posture changed in an instant. The softness folded away like a cloak, replaced by the lethal grace of the sovereign who had ruled through fear alone. Tell them I am coming, she said, her voice crystalline and cold. The cum caught with a hiss. Thomas felt the temperature in the room, plummet not from the air, but from the weight of what she would choose next. Don't do this, he said quietly. You're not the ruler they think you are anymore. Her gaze slid back to him, unreadable. For a long moment, the stars burned between them like a question neither dared answer. Then she spoke, her words slicing through the silence like a blade. Perhaps that is why they will come for me. And in that single, unguarded sentence, Thomas understood the truth. The war to decide the galaxy's future would not be fought in the outer rim. It would begin here on this ship, in the shadows of her throne. And when it did, he and Emily would be standing at the center of the storm. Asterisk. The stars were supposed to be silent witnesses. Instead, they burned with treachery. The ship jolted violently, alarms shrieking through the corridors like mechanical screams. Thomas slammed into the bulkhead, catching Emily just before she fell. Her stuffed rabbit tumbled across the deck, weightless in the sudden flicker of failing gravity. Emergency evasive protocol engaged. A disembodied voice barked in Mexian through the comms, followed by frantic clicks and guttural tones. The lights shifted to blood-red pulses that turned the elegant azure wing into a cage of shadows and warning strobes. Thomas's stomach clenched. This wasn't a drill. He grabbed the nearest handhold as the ship pitched again, the thud of impact, reverberating through the walls like a war drum. Something outside had hit them hard. Another volley came almost instantly, a bone-shaking roar that sent fissures of light dancing across the viewport. Emily clung to his arm, wide-eyed. Tommy, what's happening? He forced calm into his voice. Stay close, Em. Don't let go. Inside, his pulse hammered like a war beacon. Who's attacking a Mexian flagship? That's suicide. The answer came in the icy voice that cut through the chaos like a blade. Thomas Vance. He turned, and there she was, striding into the chamber, as if the deck weren't trembling beneath her feet. Queen Zariel. Her silhouette burned against the crimson glow, her exoskeleton alive with refracted fire. 6 eyes gleamed, not with fear, but with something sharper. Rage honed into lethal precision. "Your Majesty, do not waste breath." She snapped, though her tone held no malice for him. It was cold command, tempered steel. She moved to the viewport, her talons curling against the glass as ships streaked past in a blur of silver and violet flames. Thomas followed her gaze, and his blood froze. 3 warships, unmistakably Mexian in design, were closing fast, weapons. Arrays flaring with lethal light. "Those are yours," he said hoarsely. "Your own fleet, not mine." Her voice dropped to a low snarl that made the air vibrate. Zech. The name struck like a curse. On the main com display, a figure materialized. Commander Zech, his exoskeleton lacquered in crimson sigils of rank, mandibles curved in a predator's smile. "My queen," he said, dripping venomous. "Reverence, how unfortunate to find you so far from safety, consorting with vermin." His multifaceted eyes cut to Thomas, cold and glittering. "You have been compromised. The council decrees your reign is ended." A coup, the word burned. Like acid in Thomas's gut. "You dare," Zariel said softly, too softly. The chamber trembled as if the ship itself recoiled from the weight of her fury. "You spill blood in my name, in the Empire's name," Zech hissed, "before your weakness condemns us all." His mandibles flexed, cruel with triumph. "Your death will be a necessary tragedy, blamed on human treachery." The transmission cut. The next impact nearly tore the deck apart. Conduits burst overhead in a spray of sparks. Gravity faltered, then stabilized with a bone-jarring lurch. Sirens wailed like mourning beasts. "Shields failing," a voice screeched through the com. "Hull breach in sectors 12 through. 15 containment fields unstable. Emergency protocol now." Zariel barked, spinning toward her guards as they surged into the room, limbs clicking in a staccato rhythm of panic. "Evacuate the juveniles from training chambers. Secure the genetic vaults." Her commands lashed like whips, pure command in every note dot, and her eyes found Thomasin for one breathless instant. The world narrowed to that burning gaze. "If I fall," she said, voice low and sharp, "they will kill her." Her glance flicked to Emily, trembling but silent, clutching her rabbit like a shield. "They will burn the weakness from my name with your bones." The deck shuddered under another brutal strike. Somewhere, deep in the bowels of the flagship, a reactor screamed like a dying star. "Go," Thomas said, his voice raw. "Whatever it takes." Zariel didn't hesitate. One slash of her talons shattered the emergency release on a panel. The wall irised open, revealing a narrow, dimly lit passage. "Run," she ordered her attendants, thrusting Emily into Thomas's arms. "Keep her breathing, Vance, or I will unmake the galaxy to avenge her." They ran, through twisting arteries of the ship, past ruptured bulkheads, bleeding atmosphere into the void, pursued by the groan of tearing metal and the pulse of weapons. Fire hammering the hull dot somewhere ahead. Escape pods waited, maybe. If they reached them before the ship broke apart. If Zech didn't finish the kill first, but then the ceiling screamed and split open. A spar of jagged alloy tore free, plunging toward Zariel like the fang of some metal beast. Thomas didn't think. He moved. A blur of motion, a roar of pain as the impact drove him to the deck, white-hot agony tearing through his back. The world spun into shards of red and black. He felt her hands cold, strong grip him, lifting him with impossible gentleness. Felt the hum of her bioelectric field against his skin like the beat of a second heart. "You should have let me fall," she said, her voice a strange, fractured thing. "Not my style," he rasped. Then darkness claimed him. The last thing he knew was the hiss of an airlock sealing, and the roar of an explosion blooming somewhere far away. The death cry of a flagship, erased in fire. Asterisk, the void was quiet. Too quiet. When Thomas surfaced from darkness, it was to the low hum of unfamiliar engines and the faint pressure of a medical harness across his chest. Warm fluid pumped through the tubing embedded at his forearm, feeding painkillers into his system. Every breath burned, but he was alive. He shifted, groaning softly, and froze when a voice spoke from the shadows. "You should not move yet." Her voice, smooth as molten crystal, quiet as falling ash. Thomas turned his head with effort. Zariel sat at the vessel's control array, her silhouette framed by the ghostlight of passing stars. Gone was the regalia of the sovereign. Gone the gleaming mantle of terror. She wore a plain cloak that dimmed the natural bioluminescence of Vu. Her exoskeleton, making her look almost mortal. His throat was raw. Where are we? Between systems. Cloaked. Safe for now. Her eyes still luminous, still otherworldly, shifted toward him. You stopped breathing twice. Your body fought to stay. A pause, and softer. You saved me. Thomas tried to laugh, but it came out a ragged cough. Guess we're even. Then, no, Zariel said, rising with liquid grace. She crossed the narrow cabin and crouched beside him, her 6 arms folding like living architecture. Her lower hands adjusted the harness gently, the motion almost tender. Ethan would. Mean I let you fall? He stared at her, words tangling in his throat. This was the queen who'd shattered fleets, who'd carved her name into history with blood and fire, and yet here she was, kneeling beside a broken human, like something precious had been placed in her keeping. Emily? He rasped, panic, slamming through the fog of medication. She sleeps, Zariel said quickly, unharmed, with her toy. A faint tilt of her mandibles. Mr. Whiskers. Relief crashed through him, so hard his eyes stung. He shut them for a breath, then opened them again to find her still watching him intently, like a predator studying something it could not categorize. Why? He whispered. You lost everything for us. For a long moment, silence pooled in the dim cabin. Then Zariel spoke, her voice low, almost fragile. I detonated the flagship, she said. The core overload erased our life signs. To them, I am dead. Zetch will seize my throne. My name will be branded traitor. Her talons traced the edge of the console, a gesture heavy with meaning. Everything I built is ash? Thomas swallowed hard. Then why? Her gaze locked with his, all 6 eyes burning with a strange, raw light. Because, she said, for the first time in 6 cycles, I wanted something no throne could give me. I wanted... She hesitated, the word alien on her tongue. Choice. The silence that followed was weightless and infinite, like the space beyond the viewport. Finally, Thomas managed. What now? Zariel rose, the cloak whispering around her as she moved to the viewport. Beyond it, a green-blue jewel floated in the black colony world, haloed by twin moons. Now, she said, her reflection fractured against the stars. We vanish, we hide, and we wait. Her voice hardened, steel beneath silk. Zetch thinks he has broken me, but the Empire rots under his claws. When the time is right, we will return not to conquer, but to reshape the order he worships. Thomas stared at her back, stunned. You're talking about revolution. I am talking about rebirth. She turned, and in her eyes he saw. No madness, no blind hunger for power, but something far more dangerous. Vision. An empire built on fear cannot endure. I will not rebuild what I was. I will build something new. A commonwealth. A covenant between worlds. And you think they'll follow you? Her smile, or what passed for one, unfurled like a blade of light. They will. The old guard. Already whispers of the signal, the sigil of the first queen. When I call, they will answer. Thomas struggled upright, pain lancing his spine, but his voice was steady. And us? Me and Emily? Where do we fit in this new order? Zariel crossed to him, each step a study in alien grace. When she spoke, her voice was softer than starlight. Beside me, she said simply. One slender hand rose, talons gleaming, faintly as they hovered near his face, not a threat, but a question, not as consort, not as subject, as anchor. Thomas stared at her, the weight of her words settling like a second heartbeat in his chest. In another life, it would have been absurd. Here, in the shadow of betrayal and fire, it felt inevitable. He reached up, his fingers brushing the cool ridges of her wrist. Then we do this together. For a moment, the galaxy narrowed to the space between them, to the hum of the engines, to the faint sound of Emily breathing in the next compartment. Zariel's mandibles shifted in what he now knew was her smile. Together, she echoed, and turned back to the stars. Outside, the colony world swelled larger, cradled by its twin moons, a promise in orbit, waiting to be claimed. As the vessel slipped toward its hidden refuge, Thomas Mance realized something he would carry to his last breath. They hadn't just survived the fall of an empire. They were about to rewrite the stars. The end.